Welcome to the Steelers Breakdown Podcast featuring PennLive Steelers beat reporter Nick Farabaugh, who's just back from the mile-high city of Denver, where the Steelers went 2-0 on the season. But it was a flag-filled, point-starved outing for Justin Fields, his second start. And it was rock bottom for former first-rounder Broderick Jones, who was on the bench, but then came in relief and had a three-flag series that really riled up Steelers Nation against him. And then there is the controversy that came out of Mike Tomlin's press conference earlier today, where he compared the internal machinations of the locker room to the ingredients of a hot dog. And he was referring to this game ball that went to Russell Wilson, who was not active, didn't play in the game, obviously, but it was kind of a consolation prize for being ousted in Denver and then coming back and getting the win, albeit from the bench. And it points up the question because it's definitely looking like Justin Fields will be the starter in Pittsburgh for the Chargers. But the lawyerly answer, and I want Nick to address this, that he gave when he was talking about handling the quarterbacks and Russell Wilson, and I almost saw Tomlin referring to his notes as if this was this lawyered out answer, talking about the mindset and the no hypotheticals and how we're proceeding because of the sustained recovery from this calf injury for Russell Wilson. That was a Tomlin that I don't ever remember seeing from the podium in front of reporters, that long-winded, him looking down at notes to answer this question about the quarterback. So let's go right to Nick and to see what he made of that whole scenario and situation, and more importantly, what it means. When do we get to see Russell Wilson and what he can do in this offense that is winning games, but it's not scoring points? Nick, over to you.
It's interesting because I think, John, you kind of hit it on the head. It was, Tomlin's usually very flowed, very confident, and you kind of saw him go through his words very carefully there. Now, there were a few things he didn't say. One, he did not outright say Russell Wilson is the starter, which means this is open enough to where his mind can be changed. Regardless of anything else he said, he never said 100%. Russ is the starter. He's the guy. There's something to play for here for Justin Fields. He has the ability to change it. I think that the biggest one was when he was outright asked, is this still a quarterback competition in your mind? His quote was exactly this. I've stated where we are at the beginning of week one. I said it was debatable, and so we will stay with the status quo. Russell was in pole position. My position regarding pecking order and the depth chart has not changed, guys, and it won't until the other guy gets healthy, and then we will have real consideration. Until then, I won't speculate. Not much you can say definitively from that, but what that says is, okay, Russell Wilson's still on the depth chart list as QB1, but this could change. And Justin Fields, I think, has done enough to at least warrant this consideration. Certainly he's had his issues, but I kind of made it out to be here. Listen, Justin Fields is not a guy that is completely, glued to the backup rule. I think that's what we've kind of learned over these first 2 or 3 weeks is that Justin Fields can earn this job. I don't think he's done enough yet to be anointed the starter, but there's a conversation going on in that building. There's a conversation going on in Mike Tomlin's head probably right now between himself and what to do. And so I think that's a very interesting part of all of this is that Fields has the chance to earn it, and we'll see if he does. Again, as you alluded to, it does sound like he's going to start this week. Russell Wilson still dealing with the calf injury, and Russ said last week he's not going to play till he's 100%, till he can do the full playbook, till he can run, till he can move, and so that might be another 2 weeks or so. And so Justin Fields is going to continue to be the starter until then, and we'll see what he can do. But he's got a chance to win this job. He does. And I think that's what this is all kind of referring to. Russell Wilson right now, if he played this week, my guess is that Russ would start. If he was healthy this week, I think Russ would be the starter. But Mike Tomlin's looking at that and saying, Justin's done a lot of good things, and he definitely has the chance to earn the starting job if he continues to play well.
And that all makes sense. And I am told, you can fact check me on this, that this is Justin Fields' first back-to-back wins without a turnover. But the other side of that coin is that it's kind of small ball. It's not really thrilling football. I mean, occasional play here and there when it isn't called back by a penalty. Um, it's not the most entertaining brand, and I think, given the fact that we have these two new quarterbacks, and certainly we were sold on Russell Wilson being 1A, that at some point I think a lot of people want to see what he can do at some point, but I just don't know what the rationale is going to be for saying, okay, Justin Fields is winning games, but we want to bring Russell Wilson in to see what he can do, to see if he can put more points on the board or do other things. Because there's a conspiracy theory out there in the 412 area code that Tomlin has his fingers on the offense a little bit, just holding Fields back. This conservative brand of football that he's sort of directed Arthur Smith to sort of keep Fields out of harm's way. To what extent do you see that in the game planning and what they're asking Fields to do? And to what extent, if we keep having these, point-starved outings, do we say, well, let's at least see what Russell Wilson can do? What's the argument for that, or what's the process and procedure for that happening?
Well, I think Mike Tomlin basically told you that they were not doing too much. Justin Fields has not necessarily opened up the full cachet. They haven't unleashed him. He hasn't been asked to play big boy football. And what I mean by that is he hasn't been, back against the wall, has to get a drive going, has to target the middle of the field, has to do different things, right? He's been kind of micromanaged in a few ways where, they're mitigating his reads to one side of the field, QB run game to heighten the floor, stay ahead of the sticks. But he made some big boy throws against Denver, and I know a lot of them were wiped out by penalties or pass interference calls. But I can think of 4 or 5 big throws. Obviously, the one to Pickens was a gorgeous throw. But Van Jefferson had a 27-yard defensive pass interference that he just threw perfectly down the sideline. 3rd and 11, after a false start, stepping up in the pocket, feeling the rush, firing it out to Pickens on the sideline. Really good throw. Had another one with Calvin Austin that drew a defensive pass interference. He had some really nice plays where, even though the game plan is kind of to run the ball, play good defense, don't turn the ball over in these first 2 games, because I think there's so much new, John, not just with Fields. Arthur Smith's new. There's 3 new offensive linemen in there. There's a whole new wide receiving core. The entire offense is new. So this is a new offense that looks like a new offense bouncing together. They've had so much movement along the offensive line. Nate Herbig went out for the year. Siamalo gets hurt. Fautanu now is back in, and Jones and Aaron in and out. We'll talk about that, I'm sure. But that all has contributed to kind of this weird kind of meshing of the new. And so I think that they were trying to kind of get out of these 2 games with wins and micromanage it. I don't think they're going to be able to do that this Sunday. So we're going to see what Justin Fields can do when he's going to have to shoulder some of this load. I think that'll be interesting to see. That's kind of the argument for Russell Wilson, I think, is if you think he can shoulder more of that, if he can, elevate the guys around him, because Fields is going to have to elevate the wide receiving group. It's just George Pickens and a bunch of dudes. Can he elevate the offensive line if they're struggling? In the second half, he didn't. In the first half, he definitely elevated the team. But the penalties obviously just killed it. And so that's going to be the question. Do you trust Russ to elevate more, or do you trust Justin to elevate more? And then if you come to the conclusion that neither can elevate, who can game manage better? One thing we didn't know, and I think this is very important if you're talking about if you want Justin Fields to start, John, one of the big things that people always did in justification of starting Russell Wilson was that he doesn't turn the ball over nearly as much as Justin Fields did, right? Justin Fields has a ton of turnovers in his career. He's a volatile player. Justin Fields, through 2 games, has shown he can game manage. He doesn't have a single turnover. He's made very smart decisions. I don't really think that there has been any ball that he has thrown so far this year that I think was in danger of being picked off. And obviously the one big thing that he's kind of had the issue with are the fumbles, the snapped fumbles, the exchanges. That's not only on him. That's on Zach Frazier. It's some on other guys too. But outside of that, he's taken care of the ball really well. He's managed the offense very well. He's missed a few reads, sure, but he's been pretty accurate to all levels of the field. And he's made some really nice plays with his legs. And so a lot of positives for Justin Fields. I know the stats aren't there, but let's be real here. A lot of those penalties, I mean, that first half could have been a 20-plus point smattering and probably should have been. Certainly the offensive pass interference call on Van Jefferson, I went back and watched that. Should have been a touchdown to me. I don't think that was the correct call by the officials. But, there's a lot to take in with that. But there are many factors to this Russell Wilson-Justin Fields debate. And I definitely think that they have micromanaged the game plan for the first 2 weeks to kind of let the guys settle in, learn each other out. And they felt like they could probably do that against the Falcons and the Broncos. I don't think they're going to be able to do that against the Chargers. But I do think it'll be interesting to see what happens when Justin Fields has to go, put on the pads and say, okay, I got to elevate him. We haven't seen that yet. And, sometimes he can get into hero ball mode there, and that's when the things start to pop up. So we'll see what happens with Justin Fields. But he's done a nice job elevating what they've asked him to do.
And you're spot on with that. And let's dig a little bit deeper into these Jim Harbaugh-led Chargers and what he might have up his sleeve to try to force Fields into that hero mode. What should we be looking for from the Chargers to try to force Fields into those mistakes that he is known for?
This is basically, they are built so similarly to the Steelers. They have a great front. You look at some of the guys they have, Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack. These are obviously stars that have been around for a very long time. So these guys are really good. And they have a great front. And then you look behind them, and they have some really nice defensive backs. Derwin James is a great safety. You have Asante Samuel Jr. at corner. He's a really good player. And then you go to the second level at their linebacker position, and Denzel Perryman's been around forever. And then they have some interesting players on the interior, guys like Otito Ogbania, Puna Ford, some nice players there that you like. And so there's a lot to like about this defense. They're getting a lot of high-level play from guys like Christian Fulton, so they're elevating guys. And so what they're going to try and do on defense is they're going to try and get the pressure on Fields. They're going to try and sniff out their run game and force Fields, into those third and longs and say, okay, Justin, you better make a play here. And to his credit, against the Broncos, most of those plays that he made on third down were wiped out by penalties, but he did make some of them. And so that's what they're going to do. They're just going to – I don't think they're going to do anything super exotic. I think they're going to trust their front to win against the Steelers' defensive line. They're a deep D-line, too. They got former Steeler Bud Dupree over there. He had a nice game, I thought. So they have a really nice, deep group up front. I think they're going to rush 4, maybe 5. They do a lot of different things. If the Ravens scheme from last year, Mike McDonald came from Michigan. So this is the similar scheme to what they do there. Jim Harbaugh, obviously from Michigan, kind of bringing that over with Minter, the defensive coordinator. And so they're going to give him different looks, and they're going to probably disguise a lot of things up front with the blitzes and try and get him into some really bad spots. But Raheem Morris did that week 1, and the Steelers kind of mitigated that by doing a bunch of the rollout stuff. So we'll see how they do that. But I expect the Steelers to kind of try and mitigate the ability for Fields to have to read the full field with the blitzes coming. So it's going to be a test for him, and it's the best front the Steelers have faced so far this year. So big test for the O-line on top of that.
All right, and obviously the Steelers are going to want to play the same brand of football that has led to that 2-0 mark to avoid those mistakes and turnovers. So what and we've mentioned before that it has been sort of a conservative approach with Fields. Can they get more conservative even still in face of this Chargers defense, or are there other wrinkles that we should be looking for in this game plan?
No, I think they're gonna let Justin rip it a little more. I think that's what it's gonna call for. I think they're gonna have to trust him to do it. Listen, he's done everything they've asked him to do so far. He's done it well, and so at some point when you face a defense like this, you have to take shots. You have to take concentrated shots. Like, for example, against the Falcons, when they avoided Jesse Bates on purpose and then took the deep shot before the half. Have things like that in the game plan so you have aggressiveness. The Steelers actually threw the ball a ton down the field against the Broncos. So you look at his average depth of target and what it actually was. It was just 6.1 yards depth per target. But if you actually put the penalties back in, the defensive pass interferences, the deep throw to Pickens, Justin Fields' average depth of target was 11.2 yards. I mean, he pushed the ball down the field against the Broncos. And when he did it, John, I think he found a lot of success doing it. They either got defensive pass interference calls, he hit guys perfectly down the field. They found a ton of success doing that. And so I think you're going to see that a lot. Asante Samuel Jr. is a really good player. He's small, though. And what that means is there might be chances for the Steelers to go, okay, one-on-one to that side, George Pickens, go for it, right? Because Derwin James is probably going to have himself either predicated up in the run game, up in the box, or on Pat Freiermuth. And if they're going to double him, they're going to double George Pickens, then maybe you start to get Pat Freiermuth involved more. I think that's the next step. They started to do that a little bit, but he could be someone that you look at. And so, there are more wrinkles. They didn't really do much of the QB run game. They didn't do much of the screen game. They didn't do much of the rollout game against the Broncos. So you're going to want to neutralize these pass rushers. I'm going to guess that they're going to try and do something very similar to what the Saints, the Rams, and the 49ers have done to some top targets. You go back and watch that Saints blowout of the Cowboys and what they did with Micah Parsons. They had a chip first, and then they kind of had a back come around and kind of chop block him, cut block him, so he wouldn't get off the line very fast. I think they're going to try and do that with Bosa. I think that would make a lot of sense. And then I think they're going to trust Fautanu to try and win against Khalil Mack. I think, some things like that are going to make a lot of sense for them to do. And so that's one way to do it. And then I think you're going to try and run the ball, but I think you're going to want more shots to the middle of the field. They have tried to open up the middle of the field a little bit more. They tried to a little bit last week. It didn't really work. But I imagine you're going to start to see that a little more. And this is where, we didn't talk injuries, but it sounds like from what I'm hearing, Roman Wilson is going to make his NFL debut this week. And he is the speed bullet that they need over the middle of the field. When he hits the ground running, his acceleration goes from 0 to 100, and he is just gone across the field. He could be someone that is really an interesting matchup piece for them, because Jasir Taylor, who's a solid player for them in the slot, the Chargers, that is, he's had a nice start to the year, but he's a young player, and Wilson is a guy that can probably outrun him, and that's going to be something I think that we see. That matchup is probably a sleeper matchup, and if Roman Wilson, I think it's hard to say, a third-round pick that missed the last month and a half, 2 months almost, is going to have a huge impact, but if they just allow him to go out there in the slot, run crossers, that's one way I think you can get more production out of the middle of the field. And he could be someone that is really, really important to that. And so there's a few ways you can do it. I think, I think the game plan is going to resemble somewhat of what they did week 1, where they're going to have a lot of those rollouts and let Fields probably target the tight ends a lot, but trying to mitigate the rush, of course. But I also think they're going to have different kind of things in there. And I think Roman Wilson might be the wrinkle that they need there in the middle of the field. They need someone in that wide receiver room, and he's the speedy dot that they kind of need over the middle of the field there.
It'd be nice to see. You mentioned the offensive line and the matchup with the Chargers front, and for the first time after the game, I'm hearing some revisionist history regarding Broderick Jones, last year's first rounder. Obviously he had he wasn't a starter in this game, and then he came off and had that disastrous series with the 3 flags and the nullified beautiful pass to Pickens. And some fans, and I think even a Pittsburgh analyst, was saying that he wasn't all, I know he's had the injury, so we have that, but that it was kind of a lackadaisical approach in camp, that he wasn't totally invested, and now we see this and, the regression, and I know he's been moved left and right and back and forth, but is there any worry setting in with regard to Broderick Jones and his future, potential? Because he was a guy full of potential.
Right. I mean, there's definitely concern about him. I don't think I don't really buy the attitude stuff. He's like He's a guy that's like happy-go-lucky. He smiles every day. He's got joy for football. I never really saw a guy that didn't try. What I do see on tape is a guy that has little confidence and is definitely playing tentatively. If you remember last year, how he just played with ferocity, how he played with, incredible physicality. That was his hallmark last year. That's what made him so good in their run game. He's falling off of blocks. He's not trusting his technique. He's not trusting himself. And there's like a lot with Broderick Jones right now that's just compounding. So let's go through that series. It was 11 plays. And everyone's going to point to the 3 penalties. So let's go over those first. The first penalty, the Steelers are going on silent count, which means there's different counts to the silent count. You can go on 1, 2, 3, sometimes even 4 or 5. On that, they were going on 2. Broderick Jones goes on 1 false start. You got to know what the snap count is. I mean, that you got to have your head in the game on that. That's mental. The second one, it's a promising run for Najee Harris. He goes right behind Broderick Jones. It gets about 9 yards. And then, the defender kind of pulls out of there. He's trying to shed the block. Broderick just holds on. He goes down to the ground. Holding called. You probably could have called holding on Zach Frazier on that play too. I think it's the right call. The third play, and that's obviously the big scramble outside, the defender gets into Broderick Jones's chest. He kind of opens it up, but he ends up anchoring down, and then he's trying to kind of get to Justin Fields. Justin Fields would have gotten around the corner if Broderick Jones just had let go. He just held him one too many seconds long, and it's like, man, you just don't, just let him go. Trust Justin Fields. He runs a 4.4. He's huge. Justin Fields should have made that play. Would have been a great play. And so that is something. And then you just go to the rest of the series, and what do you see? You see, after the false start on the 3rd and 11 that they converted, you see him get beat terribly around the edge because of bad technique. He bends at the waist instead of at his knees, drops his head, and just gets completely run around. Then you look at the run game. He misses a linebacker, completely whiffs on him on one of them. He falls off his block on another, and then I thought his best rep, and really his one really good rep, was on a down block where he just washes the whole right side of the line out. I'm like, there he is. That's Broderick Jones. But you can tell there's something going on with Broderick Jones right now that's a little bit more than just, okay, technique. Yes, the technique's bad, and the technique hasn't really grown. Yes, the elbow injury, and now a hand injury as well. He's got both injuries to his right arm. So he's basically playing with one arm, which doesn't help matters. But yes, he's got those injuries. But you also can see, like, there's some, like, it's between the ears of some of this, right? Missing assignments, the false start on the snap count. Like, some of these plays where it's just like, what are you doing? Some of it's between the ears right now. And so he needs, this is a situation where Broderick Jones needs to sit for a little bit and reconvene and take in football. Like, he just needs to take a step back. And listen, some of it's definitely his fault. Like stuff like that lackadaisical stuff like the snap count. It's not an effort thing. I don't think it's an effort thing at all. I think his head's in a different place right now. I don't think his confidence is fully there. I think this guy has the fervor for football. I think he's got the right attitude to rebound. I think he's got that. But I think the Steelers coaching staff has to sit him down and say, okay, let's go over this. Let's go back to the fundamentals of everything. And what I would do, John, is I would install a 6th O-line package where Broderick Jones is a 6th offensive lineman. Give him a small role, 4 or 5 snaps of a real heavy line, and let him focus on that role and say, okay, Broderick, go out there and maul a dude in front of you. Don't do anything crazy. We're going to give you a small role, and so we can rebuild this back. The Steelers, that we've talked about this, I have not loved their management of Broderick Jones. I don't understand why they rotated right tackles. That makes no sense. I know Tomlin said today, because it was about Troy Falatano's conditioning and the fact that they were in Denver with the altitude. We know that can compound things. It still made no sense. Go out there with your 5 best guys. You don't rotate offensive linemen. It doesn't make any sense. An offensive line, just like quarterback, is a rhythm-based position. You get into a groove. You get into a feel of the game. You remove Falatano after 2 drives. You throw Jones in cold turkey, and Jones looks like that. And I think, that didn't help the fact, right? But a lot of what he did this week was on the player, and the Steelers' management of it probably didn't help the mental part of it, right? Where he's maybe too much in his own head right now. That's what I feel like. He's overthinking everything. You're like, he's just thinking too much. Everything's going too fast. He needs to step back. They need to give him a small role so he can rebuild his confidence. Give him this 6th line rule, something very small like that, and let him rebuild his confidence. He's the swing tackle now, but I've been saying it. If your idea of Broderick Jones is playing him at left tackle for the future, if you want him to be your starting left tackle at some point this season, in practice, he should not take a single rep at right tackle until he is in the starting lineup, either again at right tackle because of an injury, performance, whatever, or he's in left tackle because of injury, performance, whatever. And so that is something they need to do. They need to rebuild this guy's confidence up. So they need to give him a small role, and I would put him at left tackle and say, okay, we're focusing you on one spot. Learn this spot, learn the technique, learn what to do, rebuild your confidence. This is a project they're going to have to do throughout the year now. It's partially their own doing. It's partially on Broderick Jones. But after this week, they need to make sure to rebuild it up. Broderick Jones is not a bust yet. He is not a guy that is so far gone. This is not a situation where his attitude isn't there, his want to improve isn't there. It's there. They just need to lay out a plan and say, okay, Broderick, this is how we're going to do this. This is how we're going to get you back up. Mike Tomlin said he's going to have a chance to rebound. I hope they have a plan for him set in place. I would do something like that and rebuild his confidence because right now I just think a lot of it's in between the ears. He's overthinking it on top of the physical stuff that we've talked about that is already issues. So, that's what happens. It was a disastrous series. And I think one where Broderick Jones, the team and Broderick Jones need to step back and say, okay, we need to manage this guy and get him back right.
Hey, I love the plan. I love the idea of rebuilding this guy and starting small in doing so. And certainly, I love the idea of ending that absurd rotation at right tackle. So, Mike Tomlin, if you're listening, let's try to get on board with that. But let's turn to a unit that is getting universal accolades. I mean, just this defense. I mean, people know I like the Steelers. Oh, they could have the greatest defense in the NFL right now. I mean, people are high on it. Everybody's contributing. There's splash plays, there's sacks, there's interceptions. What is coming together for this defense, and then what do they face with the Chargers on Sunday at Acrisure Stadium?
Defense is clicking on all cylinders. However, they might be, in terms of stats, the Steelers are top 3 in just about every category you can think of. If you like analytics and you like passing EPA per play, rushing EPA per play, top 3 in every single one of those categories. Now, their splash plays definitely help that, but they are up top, and that's because they are dominating teams. If you watched Monday Night Football last night, you saw how that Falcons offense looked against the Philadelphia Eagles defense. The Steelers made that Falcons offense look terrible. So they shut down Drake London. They shut down Kyle Pitts. Bijan Robinson didn't do to them what he did to the Eagles. And so there's definitely positives from that. It starts all up front. It does. This D-line is just so good. I mean, they are deep, and they are very, very good. Keanu Benton's second-year leap looks real. Larry Ogunjobi's having an awesome start to the year. He's had 2 of his best games in the Steelers uniform. And for everyone that thought Cam Hayward was washed, go look at the first 2 games. This guy is playing at an elite defensive line level at 35 years old. What Cam Hayward is doing is just quite honestly unbelievable. I can't believe he's playing this well for those 2 games. But that contract, if he keeps playing this, is going to age absolutely beautifully for the Steelers. And then obviously I don't need to mention TJ Watt on the edge. He's having a great start to the season. Alex Highsmith's doing his thing. Nick Herbig's making plays on the outside. It's a great front. Linebacker, Patrick Queen hasn't had a great start to the year, but it's been more than adequate. They haven't needed him to do more. They've given him a lot of the dirty work where he's had to take on roles that a lot of other guys didn't want to take, and it's freed up guys like Deshaun Elliott. Deshaun Elliott, new addition and strong safety. How good has he been? Remember that 3rd and 1 stick that he had against the Broncos, turned into 4th and 5, forced a punt. Great play there. And Deshaun Elliott's just been awesome, has a pick. He's been a big boost, and Patrick Queen is part of that. I would like to see Queen get in on more of the splash. I'm sure it will come. He doesn't look totally comfortable yet. We'll see. But I'm not panicking on Patrick Queen. I think I've seen some weird panic around Patrick Queen through like the first 2 weeks. Just don't get it. His tape last year was really good. Give it a few weeks. If he's playing like this, week 7, week 8, then we can have a discussion. Atlanta Roberts and Peyton Wilson have played very well as well. This secondary, Minkah Fitzpatrick is back to being Minkah Fitzpatrick. I know he doesn't have a pick yet, but you watch the tape roaming over the middle of the field. Quarterbacks are turning down throws just because 39's in the area. They're turning down open throws because they're worried he's going to make a play. And so Minkah Fitzpatrick's back to being Minkah Fitzpatrick. Joey Porter Jr. had 3 holding penalties in the second half. Clean that up, but he's shutting down top receivers. Cortland Sutton had 1 catch for 26 yards. Against Joey Porter Jr. That's it. Drake London had 2 catches for 15 yards against Joey Porter Jr. That's 2 top receivers he shut down. And the Chargers don't have anyone approaching that level of player. So Joey Porter Jr. is off to a good start to the year. Dante Jackson, man, how about his start to the year? He's had a really nice start to the year, shutting down the Broncos number 2s and Darnell Mooney as well. You saw Darnell Mooney go off against the Eagles. Dante Jackson was on him all game. Shut him down. Impressive stuff. Beanie Bishop in the slot hasn't been super tested yet. I think this could be an area where we'll talk about the Chargers. The slot. That's going to be, I think, the one area that I'm a little worried about for the Steelers. Beanie Bishop, I think, has been fine, but he hasn't been tested yet. And the Chargers have a nice rookie wide receiver. His name is Ladd McConkey. You probably know him from Georgia. Really fast, really good in and out of his routes. He is a fun player. Beanie Bishop, big test this week. But if you want to kind of get down to the Chargers and where they win, up front is where they win. They have averaged 197.5 yards rushing for 2 games. Now, it's against the Raiders and against the Panthers. So how much do you put into that? You can put it to yourself. But J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards are doing incredible stuff there, and that O-line is really fun. Joe Alt, the first-round pick out of Notre Dame, looks awesome. Rashawn Slater's an all-pro left tackle, so no surprise that he's playing well. Their interior, though, is where you're going to test it. Bradley Bozeman, Zion Johnson, and Trey Pipkins. That's an unproven interior O-line. You're going to have a lot of tests for them this week. How do they block Benton, Ogunjobi, and Hayward? And I would imagine the Steelers are going to get some looks where they're going to get Herbig in there, maybe Highsmith or Watt over the middle. So that's going to be something to watch. If they can't get interior movement on the Steelers, that's going to be something that's going to be a big problem for them. That could be a problem for them. The Steelers made a pretty good Falcons O-line look bad. And so this right now, statistically, in terms of, pressure stats and all that, is one of the best O-lines in the NFL, but there you haven't faced someone like the Steelers defense. Alt, that rookie right tackle, gets his biggest test against TJ Watt. Anytime you have a rookie against TJ Watt, you feel good about it. I think Joe Alt's going to be a stud, but he's TJ Watt, right? So you trust TJ Watt in that matchup. And then, of course, the kind of the what makes this whole thing go is Justin Herbert. That's obviously what makes it go. One of the top 10 quarterbacks in the NFL, in my opinion. Strong arm has not done much at all through his first 2 games. He hasn't needed to because they're running for over 200 yards per game, basically. And so, Justin Herbert, I've watched the tape. Looks a little rusty. Didn't play much in the preseason. He's a little tick late on some of his throws. Had a really bad turnover last week. And he's nursing an ankle injury is what it sounds like. He got rolled up on. So if he can't move super well, that's something to think about. How the mobility factor could hurt them if he can't run, because he can run and he can be an element there that could hurt them. So we'll see what kind of goes there. But this is going to be a bigger test offensively for the Steelers, I think, than the first 2 matchups, just because Herbert, you're in week 3 now. You have a team that wants to smash it down your throat. Can the Steelers D-line, linebackers, et cetera, hold up? All of this is going to be a physical battle in the trenches on both sides of the ball, but especially here. And a lot of these guys that I mentioned, Bozeman, Dobbins, Edwards, their offensive coordinators, Greg Roman, these are Ravens guys, so they know them well, and the Steelers know them well. So it's a fun matchup to kind of look at, but we'll see. This is the best quarterback they've faced on the schedule. It's probably going to be their best quarterback they're going to face for a long time, too. So a lot riding on this for the Steelers. If they start 3-0, I mean, you look at the history of 3-0 teams and how many of those 3-0 teams historically make the playoffs. So big time matchup for them. This is going to be a really good test for the Steelers. You look at success rate too, John, and what success rate is basically For a rush, it's 5 or more yards. For a pass, it's usually like 5 or 6 yards per play. And so success rate's a really good kind of metric that kind of encapsulates, okay, is this team living off splash plays, et cetera, et cetera. In terms of rushing success rate defensively, the Steelers are top 5. They are a great rush defense. Passing game is a little more murky, though. It's, I think, 17th. So is there maybe some underlying secondary issues to worry about? I think that's something to consider. Or is that more, the Steelers playing prevent defense against Bo Nix last week and letting them rack up 150 yards of offense late in the fourth? So we'll see kind of where that goes. But just thought I'd point that out. If you're kind of looking for a concern on the defense, that would probably be it.
No, I love it, and it's a lot of familiarity. We got the other Harbaugh brother. We got these two ex-Ravens running backs that are having a great start to the season. We know you'll be following the big build up to the belated home opener in week 3 of the season at Acrisure. So we'll be following you on X and on PennLive. And of course, all eyes will be on Acrisure on Sunday afternoon, where you will be. And then we'll all be back here on Tuesday to go over all the late breaking Steelers storylines coming out of the game. And of course, out of the Mike Tomlin press conference. Until then, go Steelers, and we'll see you back here next Tuesday.